Hey guys, sorry I can't be there in class with you today. I wanted to teach your lesson for you on subtraction with regrouping before you started on lesson 6.7 in your math books today. So I know we kind of talked about this a little bit before break, but I want to go back and review it with you. So we talked about just subtracting fractions, and we've been working on that for the last day or so. And many times when you're subtracting fractions, the bigger fraction is larger than the smaller fraction. You can just go ahead and subtract, which we've been practicing that for about a week now. But there are other times where we have a mixed number fraction where the top fraction is smaller than the bottom fraction. And let me give you an example. If we had 9 and 1/6 minus 2 and 3/4. This is going to give us a good example of what happens when our top fraction is smaller than our bottom fraction. So the very first step for any time we're subtracting or adding fractions is that we have to first take these fractions and find a common denominator for both of them. So we've talked about the fact that in order to do this, and we've kind of been using this big plus sign, that the first thing you have to do is take the denominators and you have to figure out the least common multiple to find the common denominator. So for that, we've talked about just listing out the multiples of the number. And we said usually if you get between 5 and 6 numbers for the multiples, you can find one that they have in common. So 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 3 is 12. I see that they have one in common, 12. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my whole number, I'm going to rewrite my problem down here, and it's very important, especially when I'm subtracting, that whatever order these fractions are in, that when I bring them down here, that I make sure to keep them in the same order. So now I'm going to convert the fraction to have a new denominator, making equivalent fractions here that have our new denominator of 12. So I have to think in my head, what 6 times what gives me 12? And I know that it's 6 times 2. And whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So 1 times 2 is 2. And 4 times 3 is 12. And whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So now I've converted both of these fractions, and I get 2/12 and 9/12. Now normally I could just go ahead and subtract this and be able to solve my problem. But in this case, if I have 2, I can't take 9 from it. I'd end up with a negative number. We can't do that in fractions. So what happens in this case is we have to regroup, we have to borrow. So you'll see that this whole number here is bigger than the whole number on the bottom. So when I regroup in a fraction, I'm going to borrow one whole. So instead of having one whole pie or one whole candy bar, I'm going to take that candy bar or those brownies, and I'm going to cut them up into a whole bunch of pieces. I'm still going to have all of them, but instead of having one big piece, I'm going to have lots of smaller pieces. So in order to determine my whole fraction, I have to look at the denominator, and that determines how many pieces I'm going to have. So in this case, to make one whole, I'm going to have 12 twelfths. That equals 1. And once I've taken that whole, I add it, just like when we regroup whole numbers. We take and add whatever we already had to our number we just regrouped. So in this case, I'm just going to add these together, and I'm going to get 14 twelfths. Well, now I have 14 twelfths minus 9 twelfths. Now I can do that. So 14 minus 9 is 5, and then I leave my denominator alone. And then I subtract my whole number. 8 minus 2 is 6. So I get 6 and 5/12. Now the next thing I would want to do is look and see if I can simplify this fraction any. In this case I can't, because my factors of 5 are 1 and 5, and I cannot divide 12 by 5. And if I divide it by 1, I'm going to get the same thing. So in this case, our problem is finished. But let me show you another example where we are going to have to regroup here again. So let me show you one more example before I have you do a couple of practice problems. So for this problem, we're going to do 5 and 1/3 minus 3 and 5/6. So I'm going to follow the same process that I did before. My fractions do not have common denominators. So the first thing I have to do is figure out what their common denominator is going to be. And to do that, again, I'm going to take the denominators of my two fractions and write out their multiples until I find the smallest number they both have in common. So 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, and then I know 6 times 1 is 6. So I know that my new denominator for my fractions when I convert them is going to be 6. So again, I'm going to rewrite my fraction down here, my problem, and then I'm going to convert both of them to equivalent fractions with 6 as the denominator. So 6 times what is 6? Well, 6 times 1 is 6, and whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. And then 3 times 2 is 6, so 1 times 2 is 2. So now what they want me to do is subtract 2/6 minus 5/6. Well, if I have 2, I can't take 5 from that. So this number here on the bottom, this fraction, is bigger than this fraction. And just like with whole numbers, that means we have to regroup. So we're going to go over to our whole number, our 5, and we're going to borrow 1, making that 4. Now make sure you write that number over here when you regroup. Don't forget, or you'll get the wrong answer. Now in this case, I have to look at my denominator. I'm going to take my whole candy bar and break it up into pieces. So to make a whole candy bar but broken up into pieces, I look at my denominator, and that tells me that my whole would be 6/6, and I add that to the fraction that I already have. So 2/6 plus 6/6 is 8/6, and then I take 8/6 and I subtract what I already had, 5/6 from that. So 8/6 minus 5/6 is 3/6, and then I can subtract my whole number. 4 minus 3 is 1. 1 and 3/6, which I cannot leave the 3/6 this way. Now I have a problem where I have to simplify. So to remember how to simplify problems, just as a reminder, you take the two numbers, 3 and 6, and you look for their factors. Factors are two numbers you multiply together that give you 3 as an answer. So 1 times 3 is 3, and there's nothing else that equals 3. So now I have to think of my factors of 6. So I know 1 times 6 is 6. I know 2 times 3 is 6. And when I look here, the biggest number they both have in common is 3. So I'm going to divide both of these by 3. I'll leave my whole number the same. And I'm going to divide 3 divided by 3 is 1. And 6 divided by 3 is 2. So my answer, simplified and regrouping all of that, is 1 and 1/2. So those are two scenarios you could go through today as you are solving some of these math problems. So let me give you a couple that you can solve on your dry erase board. So go ahead and pause the video and get out your dry erase board, your dry erase marker, and an eraser. And I'm going to give you some problems that you can practice before you start going and working in the textbook. So go ahead and pause the video now. All right, I hope you got all your stuff for your working out of your math problems. So we're going to start out with this problem. 7 and 1/4 minus 2 and 5/12. So what I want you to do is go ahead and use the steps we just did. I want you to go ahead and solve this problem. So we're going to pause the video here, and you're going to solve the problem. And then once everybody solved the problem and turned their board over, then you will show your answer, and I will solve the problem, and we'll see if you got the right answer or not. So go ahead and pause the video and solve the problem. All right, so you guys should have gone ahead and solved this problem. So now I'm going to go through and show you how to get the correct answer. So first thing, I need to convert this fraction to have the same denominator. So I change my color here. So my two denominators are 4 and 12. My multiples of 4 are 4, 8, 12. So I know 12 is going to be my new denominator. So I'm going to take and rewrite my problem. So 7/4 minus 2 and 5/12. I'm going to convert both of the fractions to have 12 as the denominator. So 4 times something is 12. 4 times 3 is 12. So 1 times 3 is 3. And then 12 times 1 is 12. And 5 times 1 is 5. So they want me to subtract that. But I know I cannot take 3 minus 5. So in that case, I'm going to come over to my whole number and I'm going to borrow 1. So I'm going to cross out the 7 and make it a 6. And then this denominator tells me how many parts I have. So to make one whole in this case, I have to have 12 twelfths. And 3 twelfths plus 12 twelfths is 15 twelfths. Now this is an improper fraction, but that's okay. We need it to be an improper fraction in order for us to subtract. And then I'm just going to move my 5 twelfths over here. It'll make it a little bit easier for me to see it when I'm subtracting. So 15 minus 5 is 10. And we leave our denominator the same. And then I have to come back over here to my whole number. So 6 minus 2 is 4. And now you should have simplified your fraction. So the factors of 10 are 1 and 10, 5 and 2. My factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 3 and 4, 6 and 2. So the biggest number they both have in common is 2. So I'm going to divide my fraction by 2, the numerator and the denominator, to simplify it. So I'll have 4, leave your whole number alone, and 10 divided by 2 is 5, 12 divided by 2 is 6. So you should have gotten 4 and 5/6 if you simplified it. If you got 4 and 10 twelfths, you did all the math part correctly. You just didn't finish simplifying it. So let me give you one more problem to practice before you go and do the page in your textbook. So we are going to do 9 and 2/5 minus 3 and 3/4. So go ahead and solve that problem on your board, and then we'll go over the answer. Go ahead and pause the video right here and solve it on your board, and then I'll go over it with you. All right, welcome back. So here we go. I took my two denominators, 5 and 4, wrote out the multiples. 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, 5 times 4 is 20. And I know 4 times something is going to give me one of those numbers. So 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 3 is 12, 4 times 4 is 16, 4 times 5 is 20. So my new denominator for these two fractions is going to be 20. Now I'm just writing out these multiples for you, but if you know in your head already it's going to be 20, that's fine. I'm just showing you and reminding you how to get a common denominator if you don't remember those steps. So we're going to rewrite our problem, remembering that it's very important we write it in the same order that it is in our original problem. And then I'm going to convert both of these fractions to have a denominator of 20. So 4 times 5 is 20. So I have to do 3 times 5, or I'll get 15. And then 5 times 4 is 20. And 2 times 4 is going to give me 8. And then it wants me to subtract it. But when I look here, 8 minus 15, I can't do that. This number is bigger than my top fraction, so I cannot subtract that. In this case, I had to regroup. So I went over to my whole number and I borrowed 1. And then my denominator here tells me that to take one whole here, I have to have 20 twentieths. So I add that to what I already had, and I get 28 twentieths, and I'm going to subtract from it 15 twentieths. So 28 minus 15 gives me 13 twentieths. And then I have to go back over here to my whole number and subtract it. A minus 3 is 5. So in this case, I know that 13 is a prime number, meaning that it only has two factors, 1 and itself, 1 and 13. I can't divide 20 by 13. So in this case, I'm finished with my problem. It's simplified. It's in its simplest form for my purposes for today. So I hope those couple of examples helped refresh your memory of what we talked about a little bit before we went on Christmas break. So what you guys are going to do now is you're going to work in your big math book, your big math textbook, and you're going to be working on page 270. There's two problems down at the bottom. There's problems 1 and 2. And it's going to tell you to estimate, but you're not going to do that. You're just going to solve the problems, just like how we just practiced. And then you're going to go on to page 271, and you're going to be doing problems 3 to 18. Do not estimate. Just solve it. Show your work. Don't estimate. Just solve it for those 2 pages. Now, when you're done with that, you're going to bring it to the teacher to get your work checked. And then those that are working on the bakery fraction assignment with a buddy, you guys can continue working on that project. And I've left extra copies of it for anybody else who finishes that needs more fraction practice projects to work on. So you're going to get as far as you can on this before it's time to change to science. If you don't finish it, we will continue working on it on Monday. So it is okay if you do not get it done. It is not homework over the weekend. It's practice for you to start now and get as far as you can. And I will see you guys on Monday. Have a good weekend.